ask that everyone put where you're coming from inside of the chat so we can get a sense of who's attending the webinar. And it's great to see, normally we have people from many continents, which feels very unifying at this time. So I'll begin by saying I'm Kieran Taylor. I'm UNANIMA International's moderator for this webinar and the research fellow for family homelessness, displacement, and trauma. And this webinar is the last in our series on family homelessness and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Today is on family homelessness and the Peace, Partnership, and Prosperity SDGs, which includes SDGs 7, 8, 9, 10, 16, and 17. And this webinar has been part of an amazing team effort from UNANIMA International with great support from our administration and from Jean as our leader. And with that, I welcome Jean to share welcoming remarks and an introduction. Jean Quinn is a daughter of wisdom, and she is the founder of Sophia Housing in Ireland, which is actually a supported housing, permanent supported housing non-governmental organization that's been providing houses with support to people for over 23 years. Jean is also the executive director of UNANIMA International, as I've said, the co-chair of the Working Group to End Homelessness, and JCoR, or Justice Coalition of Religious. And she's also a leader in advocacy and education and research to end family homelessness. And she's been bringing that to the UN. So I'd love for you to take the floor now, Jean. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Kieran. And again, a warm welcome and good afternoon from Dublin in Ireland. And good morning, good evening, and good night to wherever you are coming from this afternoon. As we come to our final webinar, I'd like to start by reflecting with you upon why it's important for UNANIMA International to have facilitated these sessions. As an organization, we have been highlighting hidden homelessness and shining a light on the furthest left behind in our world, which for us is women, children, and girls. And so we have been reflecting on the Sustainable Development Goals, which we know are rather ambitious. Coming from the perspective of family homelessness, they are extremely ambitious and most challenging. In order to have any development or sustainable action in this area, there needs to be partnerships. All of you that have been on these calls over the last few weeks and today are part of our partnership, and we value the gifts and learnings each of you brings to the table. But our partnerships need to include others. We need the transformation of financial groups to deliver our sustainable development objectives. We need to connect with people through information technology and strengthen data collection and analysis, which we and the Working Group to End Homelessness have been advocating for these past couple of years. To be successful in our advocacy around family homelessness, we require partnership with member states, with governments, with the private sector, with grassroots communities, and civil society. We also need exchanges of knowledge across continents, industries, and cultural or language divides. Gender equality is as much about communities as it is about legal frameworks. If our epidemics are global, then the solutions are as well. Inclusive partnerships built upon a shared vision and shared goals that place people and the planet at the center are needed globally, nationally, and locally. Coming together for these webinars means we are building sustainable international partnerships, which are striving to make sure no one is left behind, especially the furthest left behind, women, children, and girls. Today, on International Human Rights Day, we reflect upon the principles laid out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At UNANIMA International, we have and continue to pursue the recognition and protection of human rights for all. We know that adequate housing is a human right, and a critical resource for people exiting homelessness. It's also vital to many other vulnerable peoples, such as victims of human trafficking, people vulnerable to climate change, and individuals and families living in poverty. It is fundamental to human well-being, and it also aids their journey towards healing. However, like many solutions to the various cross-cutting issues, which are the focus of the 2030 Agenda, ensuring adequate housing relies on multi-sectoral, multilateral approach, built on strong and inclusive partnerships between all stakeholders, including those with a lived experience. This year's Human Rights Day today, the theme is Recover Better and Stand Up for Human Rights, which relates to the COVID-19 pandemic and focuses on the need to build back better by ensuring human rights are central to recovery efforts. It gives us hope that we will reach our common goals, but only if we are able to create equal opportunities for all, addressing the failures exposed and worsened by COVID-19. We need to apply human rights standards to tackle entrenched, systematic, and intergeneration inequalities, exclusion, and discrimination. Today for us is also about the human rights to all people to adequate housing. And for us, it is with supportive services. Creating homes with support will help in breaking the cycle of homelessness, because it's the place where children will grow, families gather to experience hearth and home, and where generations to come will feel safe and secure. And in the words of Nelson Mandela, to deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. The integration and inclusion of those left furthest behind is essential for sustainable development, but will not be possible without the commitment of leaders globally. What we need and we're calling for is transformative leadership, which not only works for the people, but with the people, giving everybody a place at the table to share their needs and expertise in planning, giving everybody a place at the table in terms of implementation and review of all policies and programs. As an organization, we endeavor to act with deeds and words in advocating for this. First and foremost, by ensuring people, especially women, children, and girls, have their voices heard in all spaces, including at these webinars and at the United Nations. Our blessings and our core assets as NGOs and civil society are forms of social capital, relationships, networks, trust, and cooperation. With these core assets and values, we can find the right human value capital, and our work begins to pay dividends. We have the gifts of so many, and as part of UNANIMA International, over 23,000 members. Multiply that by all the organizations that have joined our symposiums, our webinars, our NGOs at the UN, the universities that we partner with, and all of you on this call today. This is a lot of people who have passion and commitment to doing something about homelessness. When we give of ourselves, we truly give. And in the words of Khalil Gibran, a Lebanese-American writer and poet, there are those who give little of the much which they have, and they give it for recognition. And there are those who have little and give it all. These are the believers in life. There are those who give with joy, and that joy is their reward. And there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism. Pope Francis reminded us that in the past year of change, our minds and hearts have overflowed with people. People that each of us think of and pray for, and sometimes cry with the names and places we remember. And as we come to the end of this webinar series, I want on this Human Rights Day to remember people out of home who have inspired me. In the Philippines, Francia; in Peru, Rosa; in Mexico, Maria; in India, Anika; in Madagascar, Ando; and in Ireland, Liz, Annette, and Ger, and many others. All these faces looking for and giving love. In the faces of these people, I experience hope. And as we're nearing Christmas, I like to think of it as a time of hope. And I want to thank all of you on this call today who bring hope to others. I want to thank my own team, Kieran, Eliza, Molly, and all our volunteers who worked hard to bring our publications to life and shining a great light and hope on hidden homelessness. During this time of the year, let us continue to respond with love and hope, and especially for women, children, and girls who are the furthest left behind in our world. Back to you, Kieran.
Thank you so much, Dean, for your really inspiring words today. I think I'd like to reiterate from your presentation just a thank you for everyone who's here today, which being here in attendance exhibits your concern for family homelessness and the Sustainable Development Goals and their achievement. So we thank you for that. And with the partnerships we see here today, I definitely feel inspired that we can really significantly change the future for the groups that we are concerned about. Today, we have a really wonderful panel, all of whom are dedicated to addressing human rights and achieving them. And so we'll start with Eric Godia, who was born and raised in Makuro slum, Nairobi City County, Kenya. At 11 years old, he started training in acrobatics and traditional dance, which helped him to travel in several countries, which included Spain, Turkey, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Malaysia. By visiting these countries, he was inspired to help children in Nairobi slums access better education and also social services. He has a certificate in community development. His work experiences have included being a peer trainer and child support officer at Hope Worldwide Kenya, a community mobilizer at Nairobi People Settlements Networks, as well as the project officer at Makuro Slums Development Project, which I had the pleasure of visiting last January. Eric has held leadership positions in several community-based organizations, including as coordinator for Makuro Youth Performing Arts and as chairperson at Viwandi Pamoja Youth Groups. Eric participates in social activism for children to live better lives in informal settlements and mentors children in talent management. His main goal is to develop his strengths in leadership, teaching, and training in the social field to obtain organization's objectives, as well as positively contribute to the social development of the Makuro community. And with that, I invite Eric to start his presentation, which will address SDGs 7 and 9. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and good evening from Kenya, because it's already 5 p.m. in East African time. Kirni has almost introduced what I've done, but I'll just say by my main, actually during my work, because I will say that yes, I've been employed in NGOs, but most of my work has been volunteering work so that to assist the kids, because I was born and raised in these slums. The issue, in Kenya, our main problem, when actually I'll just narrow it down, actually in Africa, and bring it down in our country, Kenya. Most of the slums in Kenya, the issue of housing is a big challenge to informal settlements. I know people call them slums, But for us, people who live in these slums, we call them informal settlements. The reason why we are calling them informal settlements, they're actually structured houses which are built by iron sheets, where you don't have any privacy as a family. Someone may live in these houses. The only thing which is separating you, two of you are the neighbors with your neighbors. It's only the iron sheets. And most of these structures houses, the main challenge of them is actually the access to the access of roads, access of food, access of also education. Like the slums, the slum I was born and brought in, with 498,000 people, we have only 5 public schools. 5 public schools. And these public schools, they are not well equipped. And when you visit these estates within, you will find within a kilometer, there's a public schools. These tell you that there's that challenge of access to education. There are people who are getting education. There are others who are just, I usually say, they are just passing by, going to school just because people are going to school. These schools are there, but the main, you find a school, like the 5 public schools. Imagine one school, one public schools, all the children will be, the entire population, all these children will go to these primary schools, the public primary schools. And you believe one school, like a school just a neighbor here, I know clearly, I show him that. I remember showing that the school there. A school has 1,800 children with 12 employed government teachers. Now the parents have to come up and how to see how can we assist these teachers to be in these schools. And that's the reason why so many mushrooming schools, which are not either registered, someone has seen a challenge and he said, it's better I start these schools. But the people that person will employ there, they are not qualified people. So the quality of education, access to education, it's a big challenge there. The other challenge I've seen, the other issue, also people, like for me, I was, the way I've just said in the beginning, I was born and raised in these lands. But you imagine, you are born and raised, this is your home, and you don't have a title deed to own that structures. Even if it's usually actually 10 by 10 feet houses. And people to own these houses, they're a big challenge. The other issue is also, I'm just touching on almost these issues and then I come up on what one of the things we are trying to work it out. The other issue is also access to clean water. You see, most of these informal settlement, access to clean water is not there. That's why people will dig boreholes within, and the water which will come there, it's only people usually say we live by the grace of God. Because if someone can drink that water who has not lived here, actually there'll be a disaster. The other challenge is also roads. You find so many roads, like the current government we are having, their priority was education, roads, And in informal settlement, these are not the reality. And they'll go outside there looking for these funds. Like our president was in France recently, almost 2 weeks ago. He was there looking for a loan to come and build roads within our metropolitan area. He was granted the loan. But if you see the way, and that's where my issue comes in, if you see the way they have now come up, how they will build these roads, on how they will construct these roads, they have come up with a different map. None of those roads have been, their location, actually, none of those roads will not be built in these informal settlements. And that's been a challenge. That's why so many people we have come up, the youth leaders and the people who are like-minded in this issue of, people call us activists, but we don't call ourselves activists. Our issue is just, we want people to access proper, if it's road, it's properly built. If it's education, we have full access of this education. So it has been an issue for all of us. Actually, I will say in East Africa. Yes, I've visited several countries. There are these challenges. And we usually tell them that the challenges we are facing as a community, it's better everyone to come up and start ironing out these issues. Because if we don't if we don't, people will continue suffering. Because if you see, the government, they have come up with a house development program. And this house development program, what they have done, they have gone and built these houses in a certain place. They are telling these people, after we have built these houses, you guys, you will move to these houses and you will have to pay something. You are telling this person who is still living under $1 per day. And even to access that $1 per day, it's a challenge because they cannot feed their families. You are building these good houses for them and you are telling them to live in these houses, you have to deposit, you have to deposit a deposit only $800. Where do you want this person to get this money? They will not. It will remain, access to this house will remain to the rich people, people who can pay. They'll come and tell you, you cannot pay, I'll pay for you, but they will change everything into their line. So what we want, and I'm glad to be in this, to be part of this, is just to tell people how missed priorities our government is doing. Because people have lived in these slums, they are still living there, and how can they access good health, good education, good quality education, access to clean water, and also access to good roads. Our country, we are 60, our country, since independence, all these slums in Kenya have been neglected, and we have leaders. That's why we are coming up as a team, as people who are like-minded to see what we can do. Yes, I'm glad through what I was doing, I was spotted by a certain organization through a Catholic church, where the sister saw me and told me, I will educate you, I'll make sure you are educated, so that when you are doing these things, people can learn what you're supposed to do. But we need so many people so that we can iron out these issues and the government to listen. They usually call us for our meetings. So many, most of the youth leaders and other opinion leaders. You'll go to these meetings, but you are going to rubber stamp something which has been already done. And most of the time, we usually walk out of those meetings because the resolutions which we have passed as a team, when they are sending back the resolution, you ask yourself, are these resolutions we discussed, guys? They are not, because they only needed you to rubber stamp that meeting, and then they take a group photo and say, so and so was there. And for us, we usually say, we will not be part of that. And I believe, I should say, I really thank God because I was given a talent, and this talent, so that I can use this talent to advocate for the rights of people, I believe, to advocate for people, the rights of the people who are living in these slums. So those are my few remarks regarding what I usually do here. But I believe all of us, wherever you are, if we know we have an issue of this, like in Africa, we usually say it's informal settlement. People are living homeless because you live somewhere and you do not know the house that person is living. I think, Kirni, you took a photo maybe. You saw the houses out there, and it's just the same thing. It's like people are living outside, but you cannot. As a team, I believe, let us continue with this work, and we believe one day there'll be a light at the end of the tunnel as a team. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Eric, for those really powerful remarks. Excuse me. What really touched me is what you said. People call you an activist, but you don't even claim that title because you're just doing the work that you see as necessary in your community. And I really admire that and appreciate that. And I witnessed it also during UNANIMA International's field work in Mukuro, seeing how people came together to care for the community and to provide mentorship and services where it was needed. So I really appreciate your presentation and how you touched upon a lot of different points, actually not just limited to questions of infrastructure, but going into questions of peace and governance and partnerships. So that was really excellent, and we thank you for being here today. And I'd say the one takeaway we all should have is also this switch in language from, instead of saying slum, saying informal settlement, because that does put an emphasis on the government's role in addressing how housing is handled and seeing it as a human right. So thank you so much. And I'm sure you'll have some questions later on. So we're gonna move to Winifred Doherty, who is a Good Shepherd sister from Ireland. Winifred has been the NGO representative to the United Nations for the Sisters and Mission Partners since 2008. She is a social worker by profession, graduating from University College Cork in Ireland. She worked in Ethiopia for 16 years, empowering the girl, child, and young women through education and microfinance programs. She has experience in community mobilization for infrastructural development, water, sanitation, walkways, and kitchens. She facilitated the girl, child, and young women to confront extreme poverty and the many discriminatory practices that plagued their lives, including female genital mutilation, early marriage, kidnapping of girls, gender-based violence, sexual exploitation, and even trafficking. As NGO representative at the United Nations, she collaborates with other NGOs, including UNANIMA International, in efforts for poverty eradication, ending prostitution and human trafficking, ending violence against women and girls, and promotion of the girl child. She is the director of the Working Group on Girls, a core team member of the NGO Global Coalition for Social Protection Floors, a member of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women, the NGO Committee for Social Development, the NGO Committee on Migration, and the NGO Committee to Stop Trafficking in Persons. So thank you so much, Winifred, for being here today, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Kerwin, and good morning from New York. It's Thursday afternoon in Ireland, and I was saying it was Friday afternoon in Melbourne, but I'm not sure that we have anybody from Australia, but I thought I would include the whole globe. I want to say that as Eric spoke, I was very much brought back to my days in Ethiopia. And that's what, 16 years ago since I was there or more. And I had visited often in Kenya, in Nairobi, in some of the informal settlements and in other places throughout the country. And it makes me sad that nothing much has changed. When you spoke about the size of the dwelling and the overcrowding of people and the lack of access, what can I say? My prayer is with you and my support in terms of the work you do, and you surely are a model and an inspiration to all of us. As I proceed, thank you again, Eric. I'm going to share screen because I have a PowerPoint which can be available afterwards if anybody wishes to have it. So again, thank you very much to everybody for at UNANIMA for inviting me to this session. And I do indeed feel that I'm privileged to be here and to share with you. My wish and prayer on this Human Rights Day in 2020 is that everyone's right to a standard of living for the health and well-being of him or herself and their family, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and the necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond their control, to be honored and realized. And I heard Eric speak about living on $1 a day. And as I read that from Article 25 of the Universal Declaration, yet these are the scenes that I witness every morning and every evening as I come to the office and go home on First Avenue in Manhattan. I pass these scenes, as I say, twice a day. And while they are not pictures from First Avenue, they are pictures that show what I see on First Avenue. And down on the left-hand corner is a picture which is exactly the same as the scene outside the door that I live on 17th Street. And these scenes are replicated throughout the world. And my question is why? Reflecting on the title, Peace, Prosperity, and Partnership, looking at this range of goals, 16, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 17. And I think that peace and partnership could be likened to the bookends, whereby if these two goals were fulfilled, we would indeed have prosperity for all. And yet, how have prosperity in a world bent on militarization of conflicts? Think of the latest war in Ethiopia, the situation in the Middle East, the consolidation of power and the amassing of profits. These are the antitheses of peace and partnerships. I have been asked to address the Sustainable Development Goals 8 and 10. And I'm going to focus mostly on SDG 10. Homelessness is the most visible sign of the growing economic and social inequalities that must end. And I have inserted a few other graphics related to the goals in terms of housing. Without a home, many struggle to obtain decent work and achieve professional goals. And Eric spoke to that so powerfully. Improved infrastructure includes adequate housing for all. And we heard Eric speak about roads. And I remember in Ethiopia working in the slum areas around the city, but what happened there was the roads were built through the slums to get rid of the slums, and people were dislocated. And SDG 11, ensure access for all to adequate, safe and affordable housing and basic services, and upgrade slums. I didn't hear anything from Eric about how the government is upgrading the slums, and yet Kenya committed to this. So I saw this yesterday on Facebook. Evictions are starting. We are fighting back. And this is the situation in the COVID scene and the COVID experience. People are unable, who have housing, to pay their rent. And so they're being evicted. In getting ready for this webinar, I came across this documentary, and I think it spells out for us the issue that faces us from the global policy perspective. This push review, a whirlwind tour of rocketing rents and personal tragedy. And when we kind of contrast the rocketing rents and the personal tragedy, skyrocketing prices, faceless landlords, a global housing crisis. With devastating clarity, Push illuminates the shadowy transformation of the city into an epic financial instrument. I couldn't find any better words to sum up what's actually happening. The properties in the city are becoming financial instruments. Who and what are cities for when we can't afford to live in them? And I will add, who and what is land for if we cannot build our homes on it and grow our food? The housing crisis has become a motif for a seemingly ongoing state of affairs in which rising evictions, overcrowding, unaffordability, substandard conditions, displacement, and homelessness have become the norm. Yet, all 193 member states have pledged to leave no one behind. Why are people being pushed out and excluded? And yet, we are all born human beings, free and equal in dignity and rights. That's what we're celebrating today. Homelessness is a sign of growing economic inequality and social inequalities. Michael Byrne, and maybe Eugene know of him, a researcher in the School of Social Policy at UCD, says, the aggressive strategies used by vulture funds lead to human tragedies. And 18 months ago or more, when I was in Ireland, I heard a documentary on the vulture funds and how they were buying up the properties where people had to vacate, and they were leaving them empty because they could make money that way. The reform of social housing, financing and acquisition mechanisms has embedded social housing in the boom-bust dynamic of the private housing system. And Byrne argues that the housing crisis has resulted from the financial system. And I refer to this as the globalization of finance, neoliberal capitalism. This creates an indifference in profit-making enterprises to human tragedies: loss of home, loss of employment, loss of health. And this is also borne out in poor labor relations and exploitative and undignified work that is made available. So immediately we're linked in here the same root cause with regard to SDG 8. Neoliberal capitalism exacerbates inequality. It's a system that has taken over and drives inequality. Neoliberal capitalism dominates the world and is diametrically opposed to human rights. Oxfam writes, the inequality crisis is out of control. And I think that's a very telling phrase today. The inequality crisis is out of control. The economy is good at producing billionaires, but not so good at producing good work and rising incomes for people.
Excuse me, Winifred, we just asked that
Yes.
you wrap up in the next 2 minutes so we have time for questions at the end.
Yes, I'm just about to finish.
Excellent.
So I would propose that we need a deconstruction and a reconstruction of the global financial system. We need a new financial architecture that prioritizes people over profit, health, housing, decent work, and environment over profit, extractivism, and exploitation. And I will conclude with a saying from Mahatma Gandhi: there's enough on this planet for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Winifred. That was truly amazing. And I think I see multiple requests for these PowerPoints to be sent out after the webinar is finished. So just to assure everyone, we will make these recordings and PowerPoints available. And what really stood out to me there, Winifred, was what you said about people over profits, which is an excellent summary of SDG 8 and SDG 10. And it's really what we're asking in addressing homelessness as well. And I think from what you've said here too, it is clear that there will be a benefit for everyone from addressing this, even if there's the immediate need to invest in people. So thank you so much for that, and for also explaining the connection to social protection floors, which is something we've been trying to do within the UN community for several years, starting at the Commission for Social Development in 2018. So thank you so much. I would say here also something that stood out was the fact that we need to celebrate Human Rights Day and take away from these presentations an inspiration to move forward rather than dwelling in some of the more negative aspects. So I really like that framing of a celebration of human rights. So with that, I'm going to introduce our next panelist, who is Michelle Macias. Michelle is an international relations specialist who has made it her life mission to advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals. And sorry, for 1 second, I've just noticed that your screen is still on, Winifred. So could you stop sharing for a second?
Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Pardon me, I just noticed.
Okay, yes.
So again, introducing Michelle. Her life mission is to advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals, youth and women empowerment, human rights, and gender equality. Through her humanitarian work, she has been able to bring aid in different communities around the world, fighting domestic and family violence, gender-based violence, and inequalities, becoming the Goodwill Global Ambassador for Mexico, and working on specific cases in Nicaragua, Colombia, Mexico, Nigeria, Greece, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. She also works as a UN representative for Man Up Campaign and UNESCO Center for Peace. She helps to create international laws and resolutions and gives a platform to all the different voices that she can. Currently, Michelle works with Native peoples of Mexico, people experiencing homelessness, and vulnerable groups, including refugees, migrants, seniors, LGBTQ+ community, the chronically ill and disabled, women and children, creating a safe space for them to share their voices, and also working to create political will to solve these issues from different political actors. Additionally, Michelle works directly for her community in Mexico, supporting the shelters, communities in needs, special schools as a teacher of Mexican Sign Language, and supporting peace education through specialized workshops in conflict resolution and creating a culture of peace. So with that, we invite you to address SDG 16, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen, for such a wonderful introduction. And also thanks everyone here. And it's such an honor being here with you all and share the panel with such an amazing people that are doing a marvelous work around the world. And happy Human Rights Days for everyone. With that, I want to say to Winifred that your presentation was really powerful and really touching and really connected me back to the ground of what we are doing things. And I think that's very special because at the very end, works like these are the ones that connects us back to our humanity and back to the reason you wake up every day to fight for what needs to be done in our planet. So thank you for that, Winifred. And I'm going to share my screen because I have a presentation for you. Okay, can you all see the presentation? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to present on SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. And with this, I want to really think and deconstruct what is peace for us. Promoting peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build back accountable, effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. What are peaceful and inclusive societies? How is peace in our minds a concept? Because based on that, we can create a concept that really includes us all. We can see peace as non-violence, the absence of violence, or we can see peace as a positive peace where we can advocate for social justice. So based on the society mantra that we have with peace, we can truly address the needs of everyone and include everyone in the decision-making process. Also, what is justice? Are we talking about restorative justice? Are we talking about healing the past so we can have a future together? Or is it a justice hand by hand? How can we build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels when we don't even have a formalized concept of homelessness? We need to start having more definitions on this to really address at the core level what is going on with our society and how to build back a better future. If we see the target 16 in reducing violence everywhere, we see the gun. And that is exactly the construction of violence that we have in our society. As I was doing my research on SDG 16, there were all these articles about how violence is addressed at the worst kind of violence that we have: nuclear weapons, trafficking of arms. It's all about what's out there and not about the micro violences that we live in a daily basis because of education. So I wanted to address quality education, gender equality, and reducing inequalities as part of the equation to really building peace and really building communities of peace. Working at the grassroots level with education, with including positive peace in the teachings, with in the curriculum of the schools, with including restorative justice and a care economy that really focuses on caring for the planet, on caring for our resources, or of caring of each individual that is with us. So what is our concept of peace? How do we address it? And what is the mantra of our society? Those are my first questions regarding to the peace addressing worldwide. And with those questions come out more and more questions, like where does our money goes to? Where is the funding in peace? Or are we funding non-peace threats? Because there are a lot of financial flaws in our system, and we have seen it so many times, but even more with this COVID pandemic crisis. We see how everyone is suffering, even though that there's plenty of abundance and resources out there. Why are we struggling with this if there's resources out there? So we need to think about the relocation of military spending and have the redesigning of the whole economic system based on the people and the planet, and really building together this as our responsibility from individual level to organizational level to private sector to political level. We really need to engage everyone if we really want to make the change, if we really want to embrace peace instead of keep fighting and fighting and fighting to get peace. How can we fight if we want peace? So also I want to address if our laws are just and equal, if our laws are really involving every actor in the society and are really being inclusive. And at least in my case, in my country, they're not. And I feel this is a situation in plenty of countries out there. The laws need to adjust to our needs, to including everyone. And also we need to localize the laws, because sometimes the speech of human rights can end up in just being a speech and just being something that the country adapts to fit at the international sphere. But at the end, I cannot go out on the street without being murdered. And this is really, really important, because we are having so much struggle with something that is already out there. It's already thought and talked. We just need to implement that. Also, all systems of oppressions are interconnected. We cannot address ending homelessness without addressing gender-based violence, without addressing domestic violence, without interconnecting all of the systems. And at the very end, it is a violence culture of oppression that is still out there. And the only way to change it is through education, through bringing a safe environment to everyone, peace education should be a form of literacy, and gender equality should be also included in there since it's a strong predicator of a state peacefulness. We need to have more women and girls included in the parliaments and youth in the parliaments, because we need to redesign the system in favor of everyone. So disarmament will end, social justice will come, and peace will come if we call it and we work from the grassroots level. And this can only be done if we call on our family, if we call on our community, in our schools, if we advocate for this in our daily conversations till it becomes a conversation, till it becomes crazy that 1 year of military budget could finance the whole 2030 agenda. And we're still struggling, worrying about, wow, 2030 is coming and we are not near accomplishing the 2030 goals. Building back a better future definitely requires a world free of nuclear weapons, of arms in general. We cannot say, oh, we're in a peaceful world if we have those threats still out there. We have financing going out there without financing the ending of homelessness. We need more people participating in the parliaments, in the global action, in the government system. We need more people that are ready to change the laws that are harnessing us so much. It's not possible that we're still living this as a society in 2020.
Michelle,
Here's a comparative.
that you
Oh,
wrap
yeah.
up in the next 2 minutes.
Okay, don't worry. So this is the cost of ending homelessness, and we can see it could be easily be addressed. And this is just in the US. And the comparative is ridiculous. It's just thinking and educating ourselves in what we're putting our money. I want to also say a little bit of what I'm doing to really building peace in partner and doing my best work as I can from individual level to organizational level. And one of those initiatives is endorsing the ILO Convention 190 to end all forms of violence in the world of work. And I am pushing this convention in many countries for their ratification, but also working at the local level. So this law, if it is ratified, it can be implemented from all levels and it can be learned and advocated for. Also, I'm working towards domestic family violence. In the ending of that, we collaborated as Men Up Campaign in a summit to address these topics because it's increasing during the pandemic crisis, and it's one of the main issues that is fostering the experiencing of homelessness. And with that, we wrote a declaration. I will send it over the chat if you're interested in signing it or having more information of how can we collaborate. I will pass an SDG 8. That's an initiative I collaborated with, and I feel it's very important to see how you as an individual can really affect the world that's surrounding you. So in this SDG 18, I really collaborated to advocate for ending homelessness from my perspective and from what I've learned in the working group. And it's just about inclusion. At the very end, it's about including and really bringing that holistically approach in the well-being of human being. So as I was saying, if we have the equation right, quality education, gender equality, less inequalities, we will have the eradication of a whole culture of violence. That's what we really need to achieve SDG 16. I want to end with a phrase. Peace education is about what kind of human beings we want to become. The concept of well-being and thinking processes that lead to the decision-making in the right directions. And it's going to take all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was wonderful. And like Winifred, you really did emphasize the need to deconstruct and reconstruct a lot of what's set in place in our societies, and including in the diplomatic realm and in our local, national, international laws to address things like homelessness. So I really appreciate that perspective. And the call that you said at the end, it takes all of us. And another quote from you, call on your family, your communities, your schools, for people who are feeling so overwhelmed by the issue of family homelessness or all the intersections which are brought out through our analyses of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think we can take away on this Human Rights Day that it's time for us to make the call for human rights to be met. And whether that's within our individual lives, communities, or internationally, or really all of it, it's time to do so. So with that, I'm going to move on to our last speaker, who is also a great human rights advocate. Teresa Blumenstein has spent the last decade being educated by and supporting the missions of partnerships among NGOs committed to justice and peace. This period includes engagement in youth membership at a community center in Connecticut, USA, that is a part of the Catholic Worker Movement, a drinking water research internship born out of a partnership between the University of Notre Dame in the USA and Uganda Martyrs University in Uganda, and a year-long fellowship with the Women's Funding Network, which supports collaboration and capacity building among foundations that prioritize the empowerment of women and girls. Since 2015, she has supported the mission of Catholic congregations of women and men religious with consultative status at the United Nations, serving on several NGOs committees, initially as a representative of the Loreto community and then with UNANIMA International. Teresa currently serves as the New York coordinator of the Justice Coalition of Religious, a formal partnership uniting the voices and efforts of 19 United Nations NGOs that collectively represent nearly 200 Catholic congregations of sisters, brothers, and fathers in order to enhance their capacity to advocate for justice and peace at the grassroots and in the United Nations system. So thank you so much for being here, Teresa, and we're over to you.
Thank you, Kieran, and thank you to each of the panelists who preceded me. I think it's actually quite fitting and a bit perfect that the discussion of partnerships comes at the end of this webinar, at the end of the series of a whole webinar series that UNANIMA has put on following the SDGs, and why it's at the end of the 2030 agenda itself, because all who have preceded me have now beautifully illustrated the deeply complex and multifaceted issue that homelessness really is. It's bound up with every issue from education and gender equality to access to clean energy and health of marine ecosystems. And so for that reason, it stands to reason that where any individual government agency or organization attempts to resolve homelessness in isolation, we come up short, and we've seen it again and again. And at best, the isolated actor provides temporary relief from the gravest and most immediate dangers of homelessness. But isolated responses, whether isolated to an individual sector of actors, individual moment in time, an individual segment of the population, they typically fail to address the root causes of the issue, which is something that we're all deeply concerned with, in addition, of course, to addressing those most immediate and gravest dangers. And we could say in the case of homelessness that the issue, the problem itself, is a crisis of problem solving in isolation. Where social networks are healthy and social protection policies and programs are strong, we have a natural safety net that reduces the risk of homelessness because it cushions individuals from the impact of crisis. And I even reflect on the term net, describing this pattern of many interwoven ropes that are able to redistribute weight of whatever they're carrying and establish stability by doing so. And so a safety net is certainly much more secure and comforting than a safety rope, which is only good enough for the strongest and most fortunate to cling to for life. And so it becomes clear in all of the previous discussions and all of previous presenters sharing today that we really require an integrated, united, multi-sectoral partnership to address an issue as complex as homelessness and really any of the goals in the 2030 agenda. I do note it's with interest that when we look closely at SDG 17 on partnerships, we actually see that 12 out of the 19 targets that will be used to help identify when we have successfully achieved the goal, 12 of those 19 targets are really directed at governments who are to better their partnership with one another for the purpose of redistribution of financial or technological or human resources of one kind or another. And typically we're talking about redistributing, of course, from the highest income nations to the lowest income nations. And truly, only 2 of the targets under SDG 17 really explicitly call for collaboration between governments and actors from any other sector, be it private or civil society. And on the one hand, I think we can accept this distribution of targets because the SDGs are at their heart an intergovernmental agreement. And in some sense, it's positive that they have placed the majority of the targets and the majority of the burden under SDG 17 on governments who are the primary duty bearers for delivering on this agenda. But on the other hand, you could say that the limited focus on civil society represents one of the many examples of ways in which governments tend to discount the wisdom, experience, or insights of the people. And my fellow colleagues who advocate in UN fora commonly refer to this ongoing phenomenon of discounting the contributions of non-government actors as a progressively shrinking space for civil society. And we know that this shrinking space phenomenon is not unique to the UN. We see it playing out in the form of voter suppression or underrepresentation of marginalized groups in local and national governments in all parts of the globe. And on the surface, this analysis of partnerships, even as it's laid out in the agenda at the starting point, when we look at that and think, oh, we're not even asking the governments to collaborate in too much detail with the rest of society, surely we're setting ourselves up to fail. And on the surface, that might appear to be a grim outlook for the future of partnerships, which the previous speakers have already established are so essential to meaningful resolution of this complex issue of homelessness. But in a moment and a time when opportunity to have a say in governmental conversation are in shorter and shorter supply, and when the financial resources to carry out our own projects feel tighter than ever, civil society really has an important choice to make. And that's really what I want to focus my comments on today, as that is the primary participation in this conversation is among civil society actors. And so the choice as I see it is this. We can respond to scarcity by grabbing up resources and dedicating significant time and energy to defending the territory that we've carved out for ourselves. Or we can really rise to the challenge of choosing to remain mission-driven and to collaborate even more extensively with those who share our vision and our objectives, in order to ensure that the purest truth and the strongest possible recommendations are infused into policy-making spaces, at least to those spaces that remain available to us, and by working together to ensure that those spaces continue to remain available to us. And for my part, you heard in kind introduction from Kieran, I have been a part of, blessed by, educated by, formed by many such collaborative partnerships among NGOs in my own professional development. And throughout that time, I have been very inspired and encouraged to work alongside civil society actors who boldly and consistently choose partnership and collaboration by putting in the work of listening, learning from one another, weighing each other's priorities, and seeking expertise from each other's networks. They do very hard work of collaboration and relationship building. And the results really speak for themselves. When they do the hard background work of partnership, they're able to make a strong statement with a unified voice when advocating with government representatives and UN staff members. And one great example for this in the area of homelessness is, of course, the working group to end homelessness, which was co-founded in part by Jean Quinn as part of UNANIMA, but involved many other of the religious NGOs and non-faith-based NGOs as well, who have become members of this group. And it began just a couple of years ago, and by coming together and doing the background work, hearing one another, distilling most meaningful messages and priorities from their respective missions, after just a year, that working group had mustered sufficient influence to establish homelessness as a theme of a UN Commission on Social Development. And shortly thereafter, they were asked to send representation to speak for a UN Habitat conference in Nairobi. And even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, when the doors of the UN were effectively closed and not much conversation was really happening between civil society and government, this working group was invited and asked to contribute significant language to the drafting process of a new UN document on homelessness. So their joint efforts have enabled serious strides in the establishment of a UN definition of homelessness, which is a critical step toward global measurement and response to this issue. And I can also say from my current role with the Justice Coalition of Religious, I had the privilege of being in the front row seat to its whole development process and birth. And I can attest to the tremendous amount of sweat that goes into the practice of partnership, of learning to speak and act as one. The mountaintop is high and the road is steep. And even that's true even when we hold common values and common goals, which of course, the Catholic religious NGOs that are part of JCoR certainly do. But true partnership really is a daily radical recommitment to common good over individual recognition. And it requires us to exercise even deeper trust and commitment to our mission than when we act alone. And I want to close by adding that the success of civil society collaborations, as in the Working Group to End Homelessness or in JCoR, lies not only in their impact ultimately on the resolution of homelessness or other human rights violations. Their decision to choose partnership over territoriality in circumstances of shrinking space and tightening resources represents leadership by example that our governments truly need to encourage them toward those other 17 targets under SDG 17, all those targets where they're meant to be collaborating with one another, sharing resources with one another. In these trying moments in our history, advocates for partnership, those who are acting in partnership and leading by example, really defy the reflex that so many political and economic leaders are exhibiting now, which is to withdraw from relationships and seek security in isolation. And in times such as these, living counterexamples are required to make the case for those disinclined to believe that security and success arise not from isolation or from peerlessness, but from enduring community. And few forms of advocacy are so powerful as becoming living testaments to the power of partnership. To work in partnership is to become proof that real, meaningful collaboration is not just a fanciful vision to be tossed around in media briefings and UN declarations while maintaining an ideal of getting ahead or accruing power over others when you're behind closed doors. Operating in true collaboration allows us to restore faith in the possibility of partnership among governments and to inspire the political will that currently stands as a stumbling block to the eradication of homelessness and to the achievement of every single SDG. And so I will finally just give my last word to Dorothy Day, who is an inspiring Catholic activist and a movement builder who spent her life in loving partnership with those who were experiencing hardship and homelessness here in New York City. And Dorothy Day says, the final word is love. To love, we must know each other. Heaven is a banquet, and life is a banquet too, even with a crust where there is companionship. We have all known the long loneliness, and we have learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with community.
Wow. Thank you so much, Teresa, for your presentation. That was incredibly powerful, as really all of them today were. I'll just say quickly for people to put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom so we can move on to a few questions. But Teresa, I really love a lot of what you said today, and it makes me feel very proud as a UN representative for a non-governmental organization, just to hear that sort of takeaway of the work we are doing is an incredibly important, and even just the approach and having partnerships and bolstering community building and bringing those voices of the vulnerable to the UN is incredibly important, even if we still need to call for more focus and voice from civil society. And I'll also say that more focus and voice from civil society is also fostering and enabling the voice of people who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity or various other multilateral issues to be heard. And so I think that's a really great takeaway. What we need to pursue is not just creating more of that space, but creating a more inclusive space as well. So I think that today, so many great takeaways came. And so what I want to do is give it back to each panelist for one final comment on what would you like people to take away today, considering that it's Human Rights Day, and our focus today being family homelessness, the gendered and often unequal experiences of homelessness and housing insecurity that affect others, some more than others. So we'll start with descending order, if that's okay, starting back to you, Teresa.
I will make my final word that, at least if I can still stay with the theme of partnership, the idea that it's so key in forming bonds and working across sectors and perspectives, that we always retain a true sense of solidarity in that our common goal in eradicating homelessness is not for those with homes to serve those without homes, but in a broader sense, for the piece of each of us that is homeless because homelessness exists, to finally be at home in our world with the eradication of homelessness. And so in that, very much in the sense that everyone's liberation is bound up with everyone else's. And so there's never a giving and receiving relationship, but as you mentioned, that all the spaces in which we are able to speak in favor of an end to homelessness and better housing policies, all those spaces are ones that we share and share equally and with even hands.
Thank you, Teresa. Michelle.
I would say now that the information is out there, it's up to everyone to take responsibility and really doing something towards ending homelessness and towards asking themselves the right questions, asking yourself, what is peace for you? Are you living peace? Are you teaching peace? What is justice for you? And what is the society you want to live in? And then really, really work towards that. In each conversation, there's an opportunity to engage someone. So don't waste that opportunity and use every second of your day to understand yourself, to treat well yourself, to address your well-being, but also to fight for what's right. Everyone is responsible now. So I will end with that.
Thank you so much. Winifred, would you like a final word?
I think mine will be very short, and it's this: together we can do it. I think that sums up for me what I've heard from the panel this morning. Together we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eric, are you able to share your final thoughts? You're muted.
So thank you for that. But before I say my final remarks, I was asked about the slum upgrading, and it's good I also give my views because I live in the same areas where the issue of slum upgrading came up. Like in Kenya, the slum upgrading, this program started in 2004, but it came to the first time it started, actually it was mapped into four areas. Actually in Nairobi, we had Kibera, Mkuru, another slum called Korogocho, and then Mathare. For those four areas, actually the only successful project which was done in Kibera. But the houses were built somewhere else, and then they were told people to move there. But that project collapsed because the houses which were built, the rent, actually how they were paying rent, it was a bit expensive to them. Now they moved to other slums, where other informal settlements, because for them they call slum, but for us we call informal settlement. They moved to other informal settlement, and what they started there was to start building roads and sewer. So that program has been delaying every now and then. They'll come, try to make a road almost a kilometer, and then they stop it there. And also when it comes to making sure that we have a proper drainage, they'll actually construct a sewer, half of it, and then they leave it. Right now they have stopped because we're having our campaigns for election actually starting next year. So they are delaying it so that they start it as a campaign, so that they'll tell you we'll start the slum upgrading. But my remarks is this, that when you are comfortable where you live, then that means that you have successfully, when you are comfortable where you live, that means you have achieved whatever you want. But in our work, what we are doing currently, we are not comfortable where we are living. So let's have that passion to continue advocating for these rights of our people. Actually, for me here, what I'll continue doing, just to continue building a social movement where everyone will be part of it, so that we make sure that the program the government has put, that the issue of slum upgrading, they make it everything to be equal to everyone. So that let us work as a team, continue sharing whatever the challenges we are facing, and also the success. People are in this, if government have done something, let us say it, but if they have not done it, then we say, guys, this is what's supposed to be done. Because the time we shall be comfortable, it's where we see people are living in proper housing and accessing good quality education to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I know you said you don't consider yourself an activist, but I have to count myself among one of the people who considers you that, especially because of what you've said today. And now I'll pass it to Jean if you'd like a final word.
My final word is with you, Eric. Your voice was really important today. We keep talking at the UN that language is important, and perhaps we talk about slums, and you've talked about informal settlements, and I think we've got to get that right. And even with that, Eric, as you said, we're not comfortable with the issues of homelessness. 150 million homeless in the world and 1.6 billion in inadequate housing. So how can we be comfortable when this is going on? UNANIMA International and with the working group to end homelessness, we will continue this journey seeking human rights, as Winifred aptly talked about, that right to housing. But it's more than that. It's all of the supports that's needed, because you can give anybody a house or a roof over their head. Well, unless you have the supports that are needed, you will not end homelessness. And leadership is needed, partnership is needed. We need all the kinds of justice that will help and support us in what we're doing. And the fact that all of you were on this call today and have been on the call for 3 weeks, it's just testament of people's concerns for homelessness in the world. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful to all of you, and particularly for your partnerships. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. And as we are reaching the end of time, I'll just finish up by letting you know that this webinar was part of a series that UNANIMA International has done on family homelessness and the SDGs. So we hope you're able to view the recordings and presentations from the other ones, and we'll make sure that you get an email with those. I also wanted to show you that it's inspired by a publication, actually 2 publications we've done, called Family Homelessness Through the Lens of the United Nations 2030 Agenda, which analyze family homelessness in relationship to each of the SDGs, including the ones that were talked about today. And in summary, I want to emphasize that this sort of panel and coming together is really an embodiment of what we want in order to prevent and address homelessness, making sure that we're aware of the intersections and doing the work that needs to be done. So I'll end with a quote from one of our publications. "We must keep the hidden faces of homelessness, Families International, on our minds and take the more difficult path of further research, coordination, strategizing, and work for change together, taking lesson in resilience from the most vulnerable of our world." I also want to note that we have an upcoming publication that will be launched in the new year called The Intersections of Family Homelessness and Human Trafficking, which we're really excited about. So we'll keep you updated on that. And with that note, we'll say thank you to all the panelists, to everyone who's helped make this possible, including the UNANIMA International team and all of our supporters who contributed to these publications, webinars, and our United Nations community. So thank you so much, and have a great Human Rights Day. Remember to celebrate. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.